What up, friends? Everything's Chrome, and today we're going to be reviewing Brigitte Calls Me Baby's debut album, The Future Is Our Way Out. Like I said before, this is the debut project by American indie pop and post-punk revival band, Brigitte Calls Me Baby. I discovered this band on a whim using the good old-fashioned method of stumbling across their CD in a store. Frontman Wes Levens and company are very clearly inspired by a wide range of genres and artists, however, their influences on this record mainly seem to span 80s new wave artists like The Cars, alongside post-punk acts like The Cure. This is in addition to many modern influences, especially stemming from the 2000s with artists like The Strokes. However, the group also has a few unique touches and flares to their sound here that are very clearly pulling from more niche inspirations, especially from 70s artists like Roy Orbison, in addition to modern post-punk revival acts like Maximo Park. Now, I don't know if they're inspired by all of these artists that I mentioned, however, they are definitely inspired by the scene that these artists were a part of. Combined with catchy songwriting, authentic vocals, and lyrics that range from funny to pretty relatable, Brigitte Calls Me Baby starts their career off with a pretty solid album that many artists that are just beginning could only dream of. The title track is our start to the project, and it's a pretty great opener, giving you a very good taste of what's in store for the rest of the record. The echoing vocals, the pining electric and acoustic guitar combo, it's some pretty compelling stuff. The pre-chorus and chorus combine into this feeling of isolation and longing, however we do have some twinkling synths in the background that also have a sort of undertone of hope to it too. It creates this interesting dichotomy of feeling like you have no one in your life to rely on, but it also has this tinge of hope that maybe someone down the line will understand you. And I think this is really captured in lines like, "When my life is through, all the people will love me. Oh, if life could be so kind, then I wouldn't mind being alive." The next track, Pink Palace, is a pretty simple and catchy one, having a very playful cadence to it that actually creates a fairly unique aesthetic for the track in the context of the record. Treating a breakup like a crime scene, the deceptively playful instrumental really creates a driving vibe and aesthetic to the track overall. The drums are punchy, the guitar riff is catchy and fun, and the vocals especially create a very theatric atmosphere that I think gives this song a lot of its personality. It's like a tragic love song from a movie or something, like the protagonist finds out that the picture-perfect couple is actually anything but, especially in lines like decapitation and masturbation don't go hand in hand. Few things are sadder than the tragic death of a woman and her man. Eddie My Love really hones in on the throwback nature of the album, almost having some 50s rock inspirations at times. The song really has this bittersweet feeling to it though, especially as the vocals croon into this pleading territory at times, with Wes Levens basically seemingly talking about this man who, I guess he broke up with him, or maybe the relationship never really amounted to much of anything to begin with. This person almost knew Wes more than he knew himself. I don't really know if Wes Levens is gay or bisexual or what, but I think especially combined with the very downcast electric guitar on this track, it's a pretty poignant song about missing your chance with someone because you just didn't know yourself yet. Fine Dining is still a fairly fun track, however, it's pretty mundane in the grand scheme of things. The twinkling synths embody the love-struck feeling that this song has, however, I do think it's a fairly just kind of average and rudimentary love song overall. It does have a pretty tight instrumental and still very strong vocals too, but overall it just feels very standard and kind of repetitive for the genre and for the subject matter too. It also doesn't really have much of an identity compared to other songs of the project or even other songs within this nature. I Wanna Die in the Suburbs is one of the more tongue-in-cheek and humorous songs on the project, and it really works. It has a groove in the keys and the bass that mesh perfectly with that whimsical guitar. The vocals are also so pining for what is basically a very silly but also very real aspect of love. This also really matches the tone of the instrumental overall. Talking about being willing to die with a boring life in the suburbs with a 4-car garage as long as it's with the person that you care about is weirdly wholesome and endearing. It's delivered in such a catchy way too. I'm also really digging the guitar solo on this track, he's already envisioning him and this other person having this maybe perfect life together. Too Easy has more of a modern influence to it, almost reminding me of a band like Airborne Toxic a bit. The indie rock lament is readily apparent and they just take it all the way. The immediate punch from verse to chorus really hits, and this is the epitome of a night drive scene or from a movie or something if there ever was one. The vocals in this track also really embody that Maximo Park vibe that I was talking about in the intro. It adds a pleasantly poetic cadence to the track, especially when combined with the dire and melancholic guitar that makes up the large majority of this song's wall of sound. The whole song does a great job in capturing the sadness of looking back to when your life and your relationship were once good. Palm of Your Hand is another indie rock cut, although definitely a more upbeat one this time. The synths are expertly weaved into the instrumental here, feeling like a proper accent instead of an afterthought. This also has the catchiest chorus out of any song on here, which definitely helps convey the sort of honeymoon phase of love that we're talking about, alongside Wes Levens just loving himself and feeling like he's irresistible. In a way, I kind of wonder if this is like a love song from Wes to himself as a sort of like self-confidence anthem, but either way, this one fucking slaps. Definitely one of the most fun songs on the project, I think. Impressively Average is more straightforward, feeling like a straight-up indie rock song. It actually kind of is very true to its name. The straightforwardness make it feel a bit more standard compared to a lot of the other songs on the project. I like how constantly on this one is. There really is no break in the instrumental here. However, it's also just not really doing anything interesting aside from that. The lyrics also just kind of continue the love song trend of the previous few songs, really not helping it stand out on that front either. It's still decently engaging, and it is fitting for the project, but there's a lot of other interesting ones that go above this one. We Were Never Live is definitely going back in the right direction, though. The guitar riff is an immediate highlight, and I'm really liking the sort of sparse, dancey direction that they took with the verses here. The vocals and instrumentals meld so well on that chorus, really capturing the dreamlike atmosphere that this song has on the whole, and also how you just kind of don't want it to end. This one is also totally leaning into that new wave angle, which is pretty nice because the new wave style is definitely more used as like an accent on a lot of the other tracks here. The guitar and drums are so crisp, and just everything here combines into a very lush and full sound. It's a very luxurious sounding song, and there's also, in true new wave fashion, this instrumental break during the bridge, and you know what? I can appreciate a good bass solo, and this song has that. Definitely one of the best songs on the album here, for sure. You Are Only Made of Dreams is really embracing that 50s sound once again, with the sort of rockabilly influence that this track has. It's a nice change of pace, you know, that combined with the vocals have a very strong sound to them that actually make this song feel fresh, even though it's again talking about love. It's a bit on the nose, however, I do think the instrumental stylings are very tightly put together, and again, it has an energy that kind of rejuvenates these tried and true lyrical themes. It also doesn't overstay its welcome, and I'm also appreciating how the bass is definitely keeping that tempo up too. It's always moving forward, and I think this is a nice one-off sound before we get to the final song on the project. Always Be Fine ends the album on an acoustic ballad, and this is just a straight up Roy Orbison track, man. From the vocals to the instrumental sample, it's nice to have a track like this basically have the high subside and let us wind down a little bit. However, because of this, it is a bit less interesting compared to the more lush sounds that are on the previous songs on the project. It's still a nice after the party anthem though, and I'm also really digging the line where Wes croons, "When I'm driving in the rain, some days I want to cry instead of dance." However, other than being a nice come down song, it doesn't really have much else going for it. This is a very solid debut project by Brigitte Calls Me Baby. Wes and the rest of the band sound very in sync and tight knit. The runtime is great, the pacing is snappy, and the vocals and instrumentals have this sound that, while very influenced by specific bands and artists, doesn't get too on the nose with their influences. And I think this is done because they combine a lot of these influences together to make something kind of new. That said though, they still do sound a lot like their influences. Granted though, their influences like The Strokes, The Cure, The Cars, Roy Orbison, they're all great artists. However, I wish we got a bit more of their own style put into this. The lyrics showcase a playful wit to them and are definitely the most modern feeling thing on here. However, they also don't really deviate from the lyrical topic of love all that much aside from the first track, making it feel a bit one note in that regard. However, the instrumental variety was good on the whole. I do think they did a pretty good job at giving each one of their influences a chance to shine here, giving each one of them a few tracks to actually feel like they're at the forefront. They don't really treat any of their influences as like just an accent piece, which is pretty nice. Though again, they can occasionally feel a bit too on the nose with their influences here, because aside from the album title, not much on here actually feels very futuristic. At the end of the day though, most indie pop and indie rock artists wish that they could have a debut album this fun. Once they find more of their own sound and find a way to have their musical inspirations and influences kind of modified a bit to feel like something new and fresh, alongside expanding their lyrical repertoire as well, I feel like they have a great album on their hands just waiting to be made. Because of all this, I'm feeling a strong 7 on the debut album by Brigitte Calls Me Baby. Of course, you do stuff to talk about album covers on this show, and this one's okay. You know, it's definitely going for that sort of like 70s crooner vibe. I could totally see this being like a Roy Orbison cover or something like that. You know, color scheme wise, you know, it's very black and white, kind of off-white. I do think the composition is okay. It just feels kind of safe. And I guess that's kind of representative of the sound of the record. You know, it's a pretty solid record, pretty solid sound, but it's also very much not really doing its own thing. It's clearly pulling from specific influences. The way they're doing it is pretty nice, but it also feels a bit safe, I suppose is the word for it. So it's okay. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this debut project by Brigitte Calls Me Baby. What did you guys think? Do you also think this was a pretty good melding of influences? They definitely have quite a few things to go off of here in case they want to do something new and unique, but also kind of retain their influences as well. Or was this kind of too much of a retread of previously treaded ground for you? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you in the future. And until then, farewell.